Hello and welcome to the second of my bonus week 13 additional lectures. So this one's all about SwiftUI. A few people asked about SwiftUI. So what is SwiftUI? Well, SwiftUI was first announced about this time last year at the Worldwide Developer Conference in 2019, and Apple pitched it as a new way of building UI for all Apple devices. So one of the things you'll see in the rest of these bonus little lecture demo things is that there are different ways to build Mac apps, and we use AppKit for that. We have WatchKit where we can build watch apps. There's another framework for the Apple TV, and there's iOS UI kit that we use for building iOS apps. So Apple have pitched SwiftUI as the nice way of writing code that is independent of the different device type and works on all of them. So it's compatible with existing applications using UIKit, so you can write a mixture of UIKit and SwiftUI. It can also be used as a replacement for UIKit applications, so you can just use SwiftUI. Why do we not cover it this semester? Well, it's very new. It's still in its infancy. It's kind of a beta, if you like. There are many problems that people have run into using it. Some of the error messages, for example, are really bad and difficult to understand. So if you've had no experience with iOS programming before, it can be pretty tough to work with. And there are bits of UIKit, such as collection views, that just aren't supported. Now, having said this, it's pretty cool and it's exciting, and we'll see a quick demo of the sort of power that it has. And also, it's the WWDC next week, so look out for updates because we expect to see significant improvements to SwiftUI, and I think Apple are probably thinking of it as one of the future ways of writing interfaces for many of their platforms. The other reason we didn't cover it is it only supports iOS 13 and macOS 10.15. So having said all this, it's worth learning it. Definitely. I really personally haven't spent a huge amount of time getting into it, but I'm excited if I ever have some free time to look at it some more. But for the moment, what we're learning and what we learnt this semester is still very much the foundations of any kind of iOS app development job. So you're still going to need to know Swift and storyboards and all of the things that we covered this semester. So, okay, SwiftUI. SwiftUI is is built with declarative Swift syntax. Some of you may have written declarative code before, some of you may not, but at its core, this means that instead of telling it exactly how to do everything and writing very kind of procedural code, we instead write more code that connects relationships between things, and we specify the state and how things respond to the state, and it handles the rest of that. So with declarative syntax, you can actually get a lot of behavior with very little code, and I think that's the most exciting part about SwiftUI. So, SwiftUI is also interactive in the sense that you can write the UI in code, but you can also preview it live, and as you change the code, you'll see a live representation of it. And you can also interact with that live representation, like right-click on an object on the window that we see here, and like add some padding to it, for example, and the code that produces that padding will get added over here. So you can make these changes on either side, so that can make it very fast to change it. And then, as I said, it automatically handles state changes and UI updates for the developer. It's easy to build reusable UI components, and you can it has automated tools to convert existing elements to separate custom views. So there's more details as well that you can see at the URL here on the slides that I'll put on Moodle. Okay, so how do we create a Swift project? I'm going to run through the basics on a slide here and then actually show you in a working project. So basically, when you create a project, you've got user interface options are either storyboards or SwiftUI, and you can specify SwiftUI here. And your app will use SwiftUI then. You'll notice some differences. The scene delegate, for example, will look different than it does for the storyboards. You will find there will be no main.storyboard file, and the view itself is created programmatically and it's added to the root view controller, and you'll see a class in there called UI hosting controller. And this hosting controller can also integrate SwiftUI into an existing UIKit application. So you'll have a content view Swift file, and it will look like this initially. It's just like a hello world example. Basically, we say, here is the view inside a content view, and we create text. And text here basically represents a UI label, or on the Mac, it would represent a NS label, I guess. And then we have a preview provider that uses this content view. And this is what powers the preview that shows up on the screen there. If we want to do layout, we make use of horizontal or vertical stacks, and also lists. Lists are effectively table views. And you do this by just saying something like vstack and wrapping your text elements within here. So if we had 3 different text elements, they would get laid out vertically, and if you had an hstack, then they would be laid out next to each other, side by side. You can also command click on an existing element, and you get this structured editing pop over, and you can select how you want to embed this thing. So there's options here: embed in hstack, embed in vstack, etc. So then you can also use inspector as you would in a UIKit application, or if you command click, you can bring up more information on the selected element. There's a library as well, and you can find the available UI elements that you can add to your view there. And you can see that these inspectors, you can either use them through the graphical preview or through the code itself if you command click on the text element here. Okay, so as an example, let's recreate our application from week 1. This was a really simple thing. It had a couple of labels and a couple of UI text fields, and we could type in a name and an age and click a button and show an alert. Alright, so what's this going to look like? Well, we're going to start with a VStack at a top level because we know we've got our 3 sets of things. Here we've got this line effectively, this line and this one, so they're going to be the 3 vertical items. Then inside this one we're going to have 2 horizontal items, inside this one 2 horizontal items, and this one just a button. That's the basics of what we're going to have. So we have a VStack and inside it a couple of HStacks. We're going to need some state information. So we've got a few properties of our class, name, age, and showing alert, and some initial values. These have this state attribute, which mark them as being part of the state of the class. So that this means they're modifiable by the UI. And it also means if they change, the UI needs to update too. So these things are linked to each other. So there's bindings between them effectively. When we want to create our text fields, it's pretty simple. What we do is we have, this is our label, name, and a text field. We just say text field. Here's placeholder text, John Smith, and this is a binding to the variable or the property of the class that is changed by typing in this text field. Okay, and then if we specify padding here, this padding is applied to the H stack. And it just makes sure it has space on each side. And I'll show you this, and I'll show you the effect of not having and having the padding, and you'll see the difference. The next one is age. Looks pretty much exactly the same, except that we bind it to this age variable instead. Next, we need our button. We just put this in the V stack underneath our two H stacks. There's some content for the button, and that's this text, but it could also be an image, as my slides below here say. And then we have a block here, which is a closure that's the action that happens when the button is clicked. Now, this button just looks like the standard UIKit button, so if we want to style it, we can style it, and we can do it through code. So we can, so this is a really important point. It's really important to note the order is important. If you do things in different orders, you'll get different results because things are applied in that order. So first thing we do is we set a frame on the button so that we make its width be the same as the screen. So it's going to be a certain height, a minimum height, but it's going to have a minimum width and a maximum of infinity for the frame. We set a foreground color to white, so it's got white text. We set some padding to make the button bigger. And again, I'll show the effect of these one by one. We set a background color to blue, and then we set a corner radius, and that gives it curved edges. And then finally, we specify some horizontal padding of 20, which would be on each side, just to make the button be padded a little bit from the side of the screen. How we're going to handle the showing the alert is by just modifying part of the state of the class, just changing this showing alert to true, and then we can create an alert object, and this has an isPresented, and that is bound to the Boolean value showing alert, which starts out to false, so it's not presented, and if you ever set it to true, it means this alert is presented, and when you dismiss it, it gets set back to false. Right? So what is the alert itself? It's the alert object. It has a title and a message, and this is just a string literal in a text object, and it's a message that comes from a method called generateString, and that method is pretty much just exactly what you would expect it to look like. Just a function returns a string, and it refers to the properties of the class, and that's it. And we can do live previewing and see how this works. And then there's one little piece that I'll show in my demo, which is pretty exciting, which is because of all this binding, you can do something additionally, like add an extra label here and set it so that its welcome is just equal to the name property. And then, well, we'll watch it at the end. We can run the app and watch the magic of specifying relationships. All right, so let's have a look at how this works. So this is just because I just did this Mac Catalyst demo, but I'm going to create a new project. So I'm going to say new project, and it's a single view app. I'm going to specify its name, which will be SwiftUI, let's say. I'm going to specify its user interface here to be SwiftUI. I'm going to tell it where to create this, which would just be here, and we get a new project. So let me close this project. I will open this here. And let's tell this to resume, and when it does, it should build the app. I don't know why we had some warnings initially. Huh. I wonder if this is because I named it SwiftUI. Excuse me for just a second. I don't know what is going on here, but this is a brand new project. Shouldn't be an issue. I'm just going to call it test demo. The language is Swift. The user interface is SwiftUI. And I'm just going to create it here. Wow, okay. This one seems to work a lot better. So that seemed to just be because I named my project SwiftUI. As I said, teething problems with this SwiftUI. Okay, and my headset switched off, so we're having all kinds of technical difficulties. Okay, so look, here's the simple example. We have our live preview here, and we have our code here. So I can literally just change something in my text, and it's reflected straight away on the screen here. And also I could do something like click on this item, and I could show SwiftUI Inspector, and I could say set the font to large title, and when I do it gets bigger, and you can see it's added this annotation to the code here. Now I might make this code slightly bigger for you. That's better. All right, so what do we want to do here? We wanted to start out with our content view having a couple of these H stacks, right? So to do that, we can say H stack. There's one. We can set another like that. Okay. Inside here, we wanted to have some text, which was going to be our name, and some text that was going to be our age. And I should be able to run this. Oh, you know what? You know what? I don't have my VStack. And this is where some of these error messages are not particularly helpful. Let's see. Okay, so now I've got a VStack. Inside it, I've got two H stacks. Here's some text. All right. So I'm going to add some properties to this class. Or to this view, I should say. So here they are. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a text field. So here's my text field. My text field is going to have some initial value that's like enter name, and it's going to have text, and the text is equal to the name. So how we do this is we use this $ to bind something, and that will connect it to the name. And similarly, this one, we're going to connect to age, and we'll change this to be enter age. All right. If we check this with our live preview, okay, so now we've got name and a text field next to it, age, and a text field next to it. And maybe because we've got the labels there, we don't really need this. We could say something like Jane Doe and 28, something like that. All right, so the next thing we might want to do, if we want automatic padding of these things, we can just do that. We can just say dot padding, and this padding applies to the H stack. So you can see this H stack just immediately has padding. So we could do the same thing to this one. And when we do, it's reflected here live. So you can see this already just kind of understands a lot of the default layout that we would want to use. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a button. I could show you how I can add that here as well. So I could add a button. When I do, here's my button. At the moment it's added into, so this is where it hasn't quite worked out exactly what I want. I'm going to hit undo, and because it created a new VStack for me here, I just want to put it, let's say here. Can I? Yeah, okay, so there's a button. I've just dragged it in. It's got some text that says button. I'm going to change it so my button says, say hello. And I've got an action here. I'm not doing anything with it at the moment. If I want to start styling this button, there's some things I can do. So you can see the frame just grips the text at the moment. So if I said frame and specified a width here, I can give it, no, this is not the one I want. I want dot frame min width, this one. So I can say min width and max width, and just give it, say, 16, and max width is dot infinity. And when I do this, if I haven't messed up the code, this button should now be, so now it takes up the full width. So you can see that by this blue line that's drawn around it. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give it some padding. And when I do, it looks like that, which is now button sized, which is good. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set its background color. So I will say dot background color, and that's background, sorry. That's not what I wanted. I wanted color. Oh, don't do it for me. Okay. Background. Is there a background? Okay. I thought I could do. I think I can do. Is it like this? Yeah, okay, so that sets a background color. I can also set its text, so foreground color, and say dot white. Okay, so now we have a button that's kind of reasonable size. It has white text, so I'm mostly pretty happy with that. Final thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set this corner radius, and I'll set it to something like 12. Okay, so you can see it now has rounded corners. And if we also want to have some padding from the side, in our slide I think we had padding horizontal 20, so something like this. And you can see when I do this, it adds the padding on the left and right. And I mean, this is where I can adjust the order of these things and you can see what happens. Like if I take this background color and put it before the padding, that's what my color now applies to the text. I think that the frame is applying to the text, and if I did something like this, then the padding applies before the background color, and the background color still stretches for the whole thing. So the order is quite important. That's all I was going to say. Okay, so we want to change the button behavior. To do that, we just can say self dot showing alert equals true, and then we want to trigger something to happen, and we do this in the view itself. So dot alert is presented, and then here's my binding to a Boolean value. So I say bind this to showing alert, and then here's the here's my code for the alert. So I'm going to say alert, and I can drop an alert thing in here, and you can see, right? Nope, no, I can't. I have to do it through code. Alert. So I can specify some text, and for that, I'm going to say greetings. And then for the message text, I'm going to say text and say generate greeting. And I'm not going to specify a button for the delete button. All right, so that's my alert. Obviously, at the moment, I still don't have that method that I need. So we wrote it in the lecture slides. Just give me a second and I will grab it. Okay, so here was our method, generate greeting, and it just uses the name and age property. And I got an unterminated string because this goes over a couple of lines. All right, so now this should be running over here. Is it? Or it stopped. Build succeeded. If I click this, cannot preview this file, update failed. Oh well, let's just run it. I'm just going to run it on the device itself and you'll see it. So this is it installing over here in a moment, hopefully. Launching, here it is, test demo. And hello. Come on. Wow, slow. Ah, there we go, finally. Okay, so I can say Michael, let's say 102, and click say hello, and I get an alert. So you can see all of that works, and that's nice. And this is what I was saying in the last slide about the magic part. If I just wrote something like this at the top of the VStack and just put in here text, welcome, and had name, right? And I might want to set this to be a large title. Okay, so that looks good. And I might want to say line limit and say inherited or 1 and say it can be multi-lines. Okay, cool. So line limit is 0, so it's now a multi-line thing. And now in my live app, I can run this and I can type, well, actually, let's just run it on the actual device and you'll see. And this is the kind of magic of the binding stuff is I can also do it in my preview here. I can type and just say Michael, and as I type, because the text field is bound to the property and my text here is based on the property as well, if I make an update in one, it just updates this label at the same time. So it's all live. And that's behavior that would be much harder to do if it wasn't through SwiftUI. And it obviously works in the running app as well. Oh, well, Hungry Hippo. There we go. Oh, and I don't have... yeah. So there's an example of using SwiftUI. And I guess I'll end this here and go on to the next one. And look out for more changes to this at WWDC next week.